Hi, my name is Arun Sundararajan. I'm a professor at New York University. Um, I've been fascinated for the last couple of years by this idea of a common humanity and the sort of the changes in the world that Patch wants to facilitate. And as I've been interacting with Patch more and more, I've started to see connections between that sort of broader goal and some of the more sort of mundane business phenomena that I'm studying. And so I want to spend the next 10 minutes telling you a bit about that. So for the last 3 years, I've been focusing on what people call the sharing economy. There's a wide range of industries, there's a wide range of products and services for which the provision is moving away from getting it from a company and towards getting it through a internet-enabled marketplace from other people. It spans a wide variety of industry sectors, from banking to finding accommodation, to finding a ride, to getting to another city, to getting a place to stay, to like getting something to eat, getting something to wear, getting money to sort of fund the arts, getting money to fund your company. And what the popular press seems to pay a lot of attention to is this immense amount of financial capital that these companies are raising and the threats that they're posing to the industry participants who are providing these things the traditional ways, the car companies, the hotel companies. But when you start to think about it, what's really happening here in the economy is a shift away from the economy being driven by institutions and towards the economy being driven by communities. Sometimes digitally enabled communities, but sometimes communities that just simply form to come up with a shared alternative to what used to be an individual activity, whether it's like, finding a place to stay, transporting yourself, clothing yourself, feeding yourself. So part of what is driving this emergence of the sharing economy is that we're rediscovering old forms of trust in our economic interactions. 1,000 years ago, most of economic exchange happened in two ways. It either happened between people who belonged to a tightly knit community. You could trust the people in your village, you could trust the people who you knew, and they were the entire universe that you interacted with in terms of like your economic activity. Or it happened potentially from the government. Sometimes the government would sell you stuff. What we seem to have sort of evolved into are economies where trust is driven by institutions, property rights, contracts. They let us sort of transact with people who we don't know. And trust is driven by brand. My 11-year-old daughter likes to ride roller coasters. She rides roller coasters at Six Flags. It's unclear whether I'd let her ride a roller coaster at sort of a different park that I came across while I was driving down the highway, even though it's the same government that might be checking these. I trust brands, we all trust brands. But what the sharing economy is enabling us to do is to sort of rediscover trust from human connection, trust from our social networks which are being digitized and brought online, and trust from the experience of others, other people's reviews, sort of telling us what we want to know about these other individuals. And so there's a greater level of human connectedness that is starting to be brought back into everyday economic activity. What I normally talk about when I talk about the sharing economy is its economic impacts, how it's democratizing access to a higher standard of living, and the way that it's reshaping the workforce. The one thing that I did want to point out, that I'm really happy to have discovered, in the last month or so, I've been putting out new research results, and one of the findings that keeps persisting is this democratizing of access to a higher standard of living. People who are participating in these sharing economies and disproportionately benefiting from them seem to be people who are below the median income in their, in their city, in their country. And this seems important to me because as the life experience of different people starts to sort of get less unequal, I think that can go a long way in facilitating sort of a greater level of sort of shared context and shared understanding. Another feature of the sharing economy that I found really fascinating is how it's blurring lines between what used to be personal and what used to be professional. We all have sort of taken, like, if you have kids, you've probably your kids have been given a ride by someone else, or, they've been, you have given other people's kids a ride, you've picked someone up from the airport, you've accommodated someone, you've lent your apartment to someone, you have had someone over for dinner, maybe you've even part of a supper club where you share the cost. All of these are sort of personal. And on the other hand, you have people who run bed and breakfasts, who are taxi drivers, who run hotels. And so this sort of division between personal and professional became a part of our economy. And now the sharing economy is blurring these lines. And it's sort of typically interesting to people because it calls into question the whole regulatory infrastructure we've set up for sort of managing our economy. But it leads to another interesting outcome as well. And I want to sort of situate that other outcome in the context of this example. This is an example from a company called Carpooling. It has a big competitor called BlaBlaCar. These are companies based in Europe where you can open up seats in your car and offer them to other people for money when you're driving from one city to another city. And so this is from a couple of years ago, but when I first saw this video, it made me think of a national transportation network, like a rail network, right? And as it turns out, this is transportation that is being provided completely using existing cars and existing roads and some layer of digital trust. You add up the number of people that Carpooling and BlaBlaCar carry every day, it's more than the number of people that Amtrak carries every day. Mm-hmm. So they have sort of built this equivalent on this sort of digital trust. And it was easy for me to understand from talking to people who participate in these marketplaces and in others, why someone would be a consumer. People like the lower cost and sometimes they like the convenience. If you rent an apartment instead of staying in a hotel, you've got sort of more space for the same price or a lower price. Maybe it's convenient if you've got lots of people leaving town from one city to another, you're not bound by the train schedules. But it took me a while to understand why it is people would offer up their homes. Why would people offer up seats in their cars? What were the motivations? And I would keep sort of asking the founders of these companies, what is it that causes people to offer up sort of space in their cars? And, they would send me charts like this that said that, we're at that point of hockey stick growth and, we want you to write about that. And I would keep pressing and I would say, what is it that causes these people to, offer up spaces in their car? And finally, the founders of BlaBlaCar, two sort of French guys in their early 30s, sort of sent me this picture and said, look at the picture, and the picture tells the whole story. And this is the picture that they sent me. And, to me, it tells a story of seeking human connectedness, right? I mean, the happy guy on the right is having a conversation with his passengers. But it also made me think about everything that I've been reading about technological progress and human connectedness. Because, the narrative that I've gotten accustomed to is that technological progress and economic development takes us further apart. It sort of replaces real emotive human relationships with tethers, digital tethers that sort of tie us together while not bringing us close. And it's sort of best epitomized by the creation of this new kind of social relationship, right? A Facebook friendship. It's not a real friendship. Sometimes it's a real friendship. Sometimes it's someone who you like, someone who you know. But it could mean a whole bunch of other things. So we've replaced real human relationships with these sort of approximations of different kinds of connections that are all sort of, melded together into this Facebook friendship amalgam. So this narrative is sort of familiar to me, the depersonalization, the alienation in modern mass culture. What's been fascinating to me is that this is not a new narrative. I mean, this is from The Quest for Community from the 1950s, where the same narrative was being told. Economic development, technological progress, a loss of human connectedness. Nisbet has this passage from his book where he talks about the destroying of established social contexts. But Nisbet, this is not original. Nisbet is quoting Durkheim from the late 19th century. So for the last 150 years, the story that is being told is of technological progress leading to a fragmentation of community and a disconnectedness among human beings. Niobe has alerted me to this wonderful literature that talks about how we feel social pain in the same way that we feel physical pain. So in light of this sort of progressive lack of connectedness, we have a physiological need for human connectedness. And I've started to see the sharing economy in that light. So Meetup is a platform that lets you connect with other people who share a context with you. And this is illustrating all the people who have been signing up for meetups, over the course of a particular day. You can see, this is happening real time. As we sit here, people are connecting with communities that they share a context with. They're rediscovering the group of people who they want to connect to. They're not going to them in the same way that you'd go to a dating site. They're not going to meet people. They're going because they share a context and they are discovering community, and this is happening through digital technology. And this is not the only example. I mean, there are other examples. Couch surfing, which allows you to sleep on someone else's couch for free in exchange for offering up a couch in your living room, is offering a short-term accommodation alternative that is far more connected. I mean, in Mary's words, this creates sort of this contagion of empathy, right? Because rather than having this faceless interaction with, a hotel that, where it's sort of impersonal, you're forming potentially a genuine human connection with another person. People make friends with their Airbnb hosts. They sort of connect with them. This happens frequently. Lyft, which is a big competitor to Uber that allows people to, sort of get a ride in a taxi-like fashion, recently introduced something called Lyft Lines, where you can find a ride with someone who is traveling the same route as you, sort of like a carpool, but without the constraints. It could be a different person every day. And they tell me that in their pilots in San Francisco, about half of their massive user base in San Francisco has switched from calling their own taxi to riding with someone else. Again, allowing you to have a real conversation and form a real connection with someone as part of doing an everyday human activity. And my final example is from France. It's a company called the Food Assembly.
Bonjour, moi c'est Marc David, je suis le cofondateur de La Ruche qui dit oui avec Guillaume Chéron. Aujourd'hui on est à La Ruche de Paris 10e, qui est donc une des communautés du réseau. Donc on va avoir d'abord le responsable de ruche. Le responsable de ruche, c'est la personne qui décide d'ouvrir une ruche. Donc une ruche, c'est une communauté d'achat locale. Et cette personne, son rôle, ça va être de regrouper à la fois des membres, à la fois des producteurs, pour pouvoir créer une vente qui va se dérouler en ligne et une distribution qui va se dérouler dans un lieu de distribution éphémère qu'on appelle une ruche. Chaque ruche a sa communauté indépendante en ligne où chaque membre peut participer, ils peuvent discuter. C'est vraiment construit comme un site social et collaboratif. Donc, tout va se passer en ligne et les membres, ils ont vraiment la possibilité de communiquer en direct à la fois avec le responsable de ruche et avec leurs producteurs.
So when I do groceries often, or when I used to do groceries before I lived in New York, it would be sort of pushing a shopping cart sort of down these neon lit aisles. I contrast that with the experience that people who use the food assembly are getting. They're not just getting a farmer's market experience, but they're getting this communal buying experience. And so I've started to see the sharing economy as a digital force that is injecting genuine human connectedness, not artificially as go out and meet these people, but naturally into our everyday economic activities, whether it's getting your groceries, getting a meal, finding a place to stay, commuting to work. These things that became individual, solitary, isolated are now becoming more community, more connected, more peer-to-peer. Anyway, that's all I've got, and here's where to find me, and thank you.